Ladies and gentlemen, I will call to order this Utah Board of Water Resources meeting. It's May 10th, 2018. We welcome you. We have a full contingent of board members today, and we're here to hear your business. So, our first agenda item are the approval of the minutes of the March 21st, 2018 meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the minutes.
All right. Blaine Ipsum makes a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
I'll get Kyle Stevens seconds the motion. All in favor of approving the minutes from the March 21st board meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right. Our next agenda item is the water supply report, and Troy Broston of the NRCS will grace us with his information and not so good news. But Troy, will you please take the lectern and give it to us with both barrels?
All right, I don't know why you keep having me come back, but here I am.
It'll get better, won't it, Troy?
Oh yeah, it will, eventually. Someday. Let's see here. So, looking at the statewide map, we'll start off with the map on the left there is April 1st, and the map on the right is May 1st. So, April 1 was really, for this snowpack year, was almost close to the peak of the snowpack for this winter. Last year, where we had a lot more snow, the peak actually occurred closer to March 1. But as you can see, between the month April 1 and May 1, we had a lot of the snowpack come off. And given that we had about half the snowpack that we normally have, it's not a surprise that the snowpack is coming off quick. So I looked at, this graph displays the percent of meltout from April 1 to May 1. The orange color is what you would normally see for that meltout period from May to April, from April to May. As you can see, many of the basins would be closer to 40% melting out in a normal snowpack year. But this year, due to the low snowpack, we've had a tremendous increase in the meltout for the basins for that 1 month. Many of the basins completely melted out, and many more came close to being melted out for as of May 1. When we look at the percent difference between this year and a normal year, we see that there's a few basins here that have increased tremendously, like Lower Sevier, Sand Pitch at 62 and 71%. And that's the difference between the meltout that occurred this year to what you normally see in that basin for a normal year. So on average, the meltout increased by about 40% for the snowpack this year. And given that the snowpack was about ranging 50 to 60% of normal, it's not a surprise to see it melting out at that much of an increase to 40% rate.
So Troy,
yes.
On that bar chart, or the higher the number, the more melted out you are? Correct. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. So as you can see, the Bear River, that was one of the bear basins. It hovered around 78% throughout the year, and it only increased by 19% as opposed to what normally would have melted out. So this year it melted out 43%, and then on a normal year, the Bear River Basin would have melted out 23% from April 1 values to May 1 values.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I just thought, you know, you're always looking for higher numbers are good, aren't they? But apparently not in this case.
No, I like to show us different ways on how badly to show what the year was. So it's interesting here when you look at southeast Utah. Normally it melts out 85%, and this year it increased by 15% to 100%. And so that's the increase for southeastern Utah and even southwestern and Escalante, those being the most southern basins, they melt out the quickest from the April to May values. And then most of the basins normally will have melted out at around 20 to 30%. But this year, there's a incredible increase due to half the snowpack that we usually have. So I thought that was somewhat interesting, but not surprising, because when we have low snowpack, we expect more rapid meltout to occur, and it did. So when we look at the basin graphs for snowwater equivalent, starting at the Bear and working our way south, just about all the basins have less 5 inches or less than 5 inches of snowwater equivalent existing, or they're completely melted out. So the Bear River right now is sitting at 47% of average of normal. And then when we look at also looking at the stream gauges that exist within the basins, we see that the Bear River near Utah-Wyoming state line is actually trending pretty close or a little above what you would normally see for the median flow for this location. And given that Bear River has done exceptionally much better than the rest of the basins, this isn't too surprising to see. Little Bear River, which is in the lower Bear Basin, that is starting to appear like it's almost peaked out and starting to recede some, but we still have a few more months left of runoff to go, so that might increase again. And Weber Ogden, that's at less than 5 inches, is currently at 20%. When we look at Weber River at Gateway, it's quite a bit less. The current flow is quite a bit less than what you normally see at that forecast location. Again, there's a few months left, so it might increase, or we may start to see a decline in the flow at that river. Northeastern Uintas is actually at 61%. They got a nice bump from the last storm, but it dropped a lot. When you look at that black line, which is our current 2018 water year, it dropped a lot in the last month. And it's doing quite well there at Big Brush Creek. It's meeting currently at the normal flow at that location. And Duchesne River is declining. It's at 40%. It got a little bump in the last storm. When you look at Duchesne River forecast location, it's not doing nearly as well, as the observed data is much lower than what we would hope to expect there for a normal snowpack year. Provo, Jordan, it's at 23%, and it's tracking along pretty well, along with normal flows at Provo River near Woodland. Twilla Valley is nearly melted out at 5% of normal. Lower Sevier is completely melted out based on our snowtail sites in the basin. Upper Sevier is nearly melted out. It's at 28%. And as you can see, Sevier River in Kingston, it actually dropped quite a bit after April 1, and it's flowing pretty low. But that's also a basin that really has not got a lot of snow over the last year, over the last snowpack. Severe sand pitch, we're at 5% there, and that is lower than expected. So as we go further down south, you'll see a lot of the observed flows are much less than what you would normally see at the forecast locations. And again, it's not a surprise given the snowpack that we've had this past year. The price, sand, that's it's currently at 3%, it's almost melted out. And that, surprisingly, near Farron is doing a little better than you would expect. It's close to normal flows at that site. Dirty Devil is at 24%. Beaver River is 18%, and Beaver is close to normal, but not quite for the observed flow at Beaver River at this time. Southwest is 18%, with probably less than an inch of snowwater equivalent at that location, or for that basin. And we can see here that the Virgin River at Virgin is much lower than what you normally get at this time of year. Escalante is completely melted out. Southeast is melted out. And south Mill Creek near Shelley Tunnel, that is, again, the flows there are much lower than what we would normally have during a normal snowpack year. When we look at the soils, we see soils, again, the soils have been doing quite well up north. So on the Bear and northeasterns, the current soil moistures at the snow-tell sites are tracking along pretty close to normal. Has come down to Provo and Weber. Again, they're tracking pretty close to normal for soil moistures. But as we get further south, we look at lower severe and upper severe, we experience some very dry soils throughout the winter. And then once this 50% snowpack really started to melt, soils responded quickly and quickly saturated, and they seem to have peaked earlier than you'd normally expect. But given the dry soils and the early meltout, that's not a surprise either. Price of sand and sand pitch area just show the similar results as lower severe, where the peak is occurring a little bit quicker than you would normally expect. And then southeastern and southwestern, even the southeastern, we're seeing the soil starting to dry out already. So that's another indication of the low snowpack and the dry soils in that area. So the current conditions for the streams in Utah is sort of a mixed bag. We got a number of sites that are actually pretty close to normal at this time of year, and we also have quite a few sites that are well below normal at what we expect this time of year. Given that we're only about a month in the runoff period, we can expect to see that these the normal streams to actually decline at an earlier rate than what we normally expect. And then there's a few spots up there in the Provo River where you have a little bit much above stream flow, two little blue dots almost right in the middle. But everything else is year average or below average. Reservoirs, and it's the one bright spot that we got to look forward to. Thankfully, last year we had a pretty good we had a very good snowpack year, and we had significant water carryover in those reservoirs. Most of the big reservoirs are sitting at close to 80% capacity, and so if you're a farmer and you're dependent on those reservoirs, you will probably do all right for this year. If you do not have a reservoir to depend on, or if you have one of the reservoirs that did not do as well as last year, has low carryover, it's going to be a tough year and you'll need to conserve your water. So looking forward, our 1 month outlook according to NOAA is above average temperatures for within Utah. And then again, it just kind of continues for the 3 month outlook, a little drier actually down south. But again, this is 3 months out. It's hard to predict even 2 weeks out. When we look at the precip, month of May looks pretty good. Looks like we'll have some precipitation coming through, and we certainly have a nice rain event coming in starting tomorrow. So hopefully we'll continue to keep that trend and get some more rain every week. That would be nice. That would help. And then, of course, 3 month outlook, we're going back to below average precipitation probabilities. So, sum it up, our percent normal for snowwater equivalent in the Bear is at 47, northeastern Uinta is at 61, and Duchesne's at 40%. But again, when we look at the actual amount of snow up there and the amount of water in the snowpack, we're looking at less than 5 inches of water left up in that snowpack. And the remaining basins are either completely melted out and on up to 28% of average. So the April to May meltout has actually increased by about 40% or higher. So higher over what a normal snowpack year would melt out at for the month of April. And again, when we get a low snowpack, we expect early meltouts, lower flows, lower peak flows, and then a lower cumulative flow. So the May 1 stream flow forecasts range about 30 to 60%. Up in the Bear River and the eastern Uintas, they're a little bit higher. When you go down south to the southern Utah, we're looking at a little bit lower. So when you got half the snowpack, you could probably pretty much expect to get half the runoff. And that's what we're looking at. Soil moistures, again, they indicated a rapid meltout period where they've increased in moisture content sooner than expected, and they're peaking earlier, and they will likely dry out earlier as well. So, given all that, we can expect a early flow, a lower peak, and a lower April-July volume coming off from the snowpack this year. Now again, one bright side is our reservoirs currently statewide sits at about 79% compared to 71% last year. So I've often, throughout this year, I look a lot at 2015, and 2015 was a lower snowpack than we had this year. In addition, we didn't have the reservoir storage that we had in 2015 that we have this year. So that's really the only good news I can give you on this. And that's it. Are there any questions?
Questions from the board for Mr. Broston?
Well, I don't know.
He's had some bad series of years.
He was here in 2015.
Yeah.
You did improve it.
Yeah.
The question, Troy, is the staffing of the division looking any brighter, or is it still as bleak?
Well, I heard the rumor that we are closer to having a chief for NRCS. I think that's really what's holding us up for staffing NRCS wide. Is right now there's an acting chief in NRCS, and if we get a permanent person in there, then I think that will open the doors for staffing. So in a roundabout way, I really don't have a good answer.
Well, I thought I should ask the question anyway.
Thanks for asking.
Because I'm concerned.
I am optimistic.
Well, good.
But,
I guess we all need to be optimistic,
yeah.
or we wouldn't be in the water business if we weren't.
No, I really wouldn't.
Hey, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
At this time, I would like to identify guests who are with us today. Con Baldwin from Pacific Corp is with us today. Justin Atkinson from Sunrise Engineering is with us today. And Mike Wilson from CRS Engineers is with us today. So appreciate your attendance with us today, gentlemen. Thank you. All right, our next agenda item are the committal of funds, and our first project is E407 Muddy Creek Irrigation Company, and Jacqueline Pacheco will make a presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the board. The applicant serves approximately 107 shareholders, irrigating about 7,800 acres of land. The shareholders are divided into the Emery series and the Moore group, and this project will directly benefit the Emery series. In its March 21st, 2018 meeting, the board authorized Muddy Creek Irrigation Company's project. The purpose of this project is to extend the existing 6.3-mile pipeline from Muddy Creek an additional 4.1 miles and install regulating ponds, pipes, and sprinkler systems for local farms to reduce the high water table and subsequent salt loading. All 5,300 acres of the Emery series are currently flood irrigated. The on-farm irrigation component of this project will be part of another phase. The cost estimate and sharing remain as authorized. Staff recommends that the board commit 20.8% of the project cost up to $1 million, and the project be purchased at 0% interest over 20 years with annual payments of approximately $50,000. That is staff's report.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Does the board have questions of Ms. Pacheco on E407, Muddy Creek Irrigation Company? If not, Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, I'd make a motion that the board commit 20.8% of the project cost up to $1 million, and that the project be purchased at 0% interest over 20 years with annual payments of approximately $50,000.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second that motion.
Okay, Mr. Lemon seconds the motion. Any further discussion on the project? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you,
Thank you.
Jacqueline. One item I need to bring to the attention of the board is to be sure to speak directly into the microphone so that we can pick it up for broadcast purposes or recording purposes. So appreciate that. And be sure that your green light is on your speaker or on your microphone. Is you push it, it's off, and if you have no green light, you're silent. So, thank you. All right, our next agenda item or special item reports are the Summit Creek Irrigation and Canal Company. And I believe we have with us today Mr. Phil Rowley, Mr. Rowley, Summit Creek Irrigation and Canal Company, and Todd Rowley, Secretary of Summit Creek Irrigation and Canal Company. So welcome, gentlemen, and Ben Merritt will make a presentation. So Ben.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The Summit Creek Irrigation Company is engaged in a 4-phase project. The most recent phase was phase number 3, which is nearing completion. The project, or this phase of the project, has experienced a number of delays, including in the process of well drilling. There were some tools lost in the well, and unbeknownst to the well driller, who continued to drill on top of his tools, caused some pretty significant delays while they fished their tools out. After the well was finally finished drilling, the applicant decided to attempt to get better yield out of the well by drilling the well deeper, which they did, and which they did achieve. And then finally, there was also another delay in the project that was involving Rocky Mountain Power. There were difficulties getting power extended to the site, and that also added several months to the project. The applicant appeared before the board in December 2017 to request an extension of repayment on the project because of these delays. And since then, the well house that you see in the photo has been completed. The piping and appurtenances in the well house have been installed. The pump and the motor have also been placed. And the well is nearly ready to go. It's ready to go. But because of the delays, it's been discovered that, it's been realized that the project costs have been increased, and so Summit Creek representatives are here to ask for $100,000 of additional funds for the project.
Mr. Rowley, do you have comment you'd like to add to Ben's presentation?
I think he summed it up quite well.
Please speak.
I think he summed it up quite well.
Mike, please. Appreciate you making that effort. Thank you very much. We can hear you much better. So, Todd, do you have anything you'd like to add to it, or?
No.
Okay, very good. Questions from the board for Randy?
I just was curious, what kind of yield did you end up with, and how deep did you go? What is the total depth of your well?
The total depth was 650 feet. In the test pumping, it's 2,400 gallons.
Thank you.
So we'll see if that
If
what it
it'll-
turns out to
if it'll
as we
produce
get
that.
get it into production. But
Well, hopefully it will.
No, it sounds like a good number to me. Any other questions?
I do for Ben. At one, we say 100,000 additional money, but then we also say 84,500.
Yeah, excuse me. So the 84,000 is the 85% would be the board's share of the total increase, and then the rest would be the applicant's share.
Okay. Any other questions? Steve?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion that the board commits an additional $84,500 and amend the purchase agreement to state the board will provide 85% of the project cost up to $1,776,500, and the new balance being returned at 2.5% interest over 24 years for annual payments of approximately $95,000 beginning December 1, 2018.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Farrell makes the motion. Mr. Crozier makes the second to the motion. Any further discussion on the project? Seeing none, all in favor of increasing funding to the project E308, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ben, and thank you to the Rollies.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right, our next agenda item is Haights Creek Irrigation. Is a withdrawal, and Kyle, Mr. Stevens, would you care to make a motion on that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion that the project be withdrawn from further consideration by the board.
Steve Farrell seconds the motion. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
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 Seeing none, vote was unanimous. Thank you. Next agenda item is Lake Powell Pipeline Report, and Mr. Joel Williams will give us that report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I'm happy to give another update on Lake Powell Pipeline. As I've been sitting in the audience, I keep hitting refresh on this FERC agenda, and they have not yet posted their agenda for their May 17th meeting coming up in a week. To find out if our project is on their agenda, and what we're hoping is to get that jurisdictional determination for this project, to find out what they will determine is their jurisdiction, and then that'll help us to know how to proceed with all the involved agencies. What will happen is when FERC does make that determination, it will restart the comment period on the Ready for Environmental Analysis announcement, and there will be a 60-day comment period followed by a 45-day response period, and then they will 6 months after that will release a draft EIS, environmental impact statement is the schedule as we understand it. So everything right now is waiting on that determination, and we hope to get that soon. Meanwhile, we have been continuing to meet with all the other agencies. We have recently met with Bureau of Land Management to keep them updated, answer any questions that they have, talk about impacts and just any concerns that they have with the project concerning their right of way. We've met with National Park Service. Similar discussions, also Fish and Wildlife Service, both local and national level. We will be updating our biological assessment for the project to incorporate some of these recent discussions with Fish and Wildlife Service. We also met with the Army Corps of Engineers to talk about what will need to take place with a Section 404 permit from the Army Corps. So it's in this waiting period, we are actually taking advantage of it to continue to meet and make sure that we're keeping all the involved agencies, and as you know, there's a lot of them, keeping them updated and making sure that their questions are answered. We've also met recently, and will continue to meet with the Kaibab Band of the Paiute Tribe to keep them informed and work with them on any questions that they've got. And that's what we'll continue to do. Budget-wise, things have slowed down just a little bit for the project, so we are currently under budget as we'd forecasted it, but that's largely due to this slowdown that we've had, and we expect that once the determination is made, we'll probably get back on target with our Stantec contract as far as maybe spending a little bit more than we have in the last few months, but we're looking good where we are currently sitting. I've spent about 40% of the current contract with them, and we're probably 60% of the way through the work that we've expected them to do under this current amendment of the contract. So the budget's looking good for that. That contract with Stantec does. The current amendment we're operating under goes through to the end of this year, so probably closer to the end of the year we'll come back to the board to talk about looking at next year and any additional funds that we anticipate needing for another amendment to that contract. But that's where things are standing right now. Any questions from the board on the project?
Any questions, Blaine?
Which year? You say this year, the fiscal year, or the calendar year?
Calendar year. So end of calendar year 2018 is when that amendment number 8, which we're currently operating under, would end, and we expect that at that point there still would be remaining funds on the contract, but time-wise we would need, and then potentially as we look ahead we'd want to add time and money to look at next year for that contract. So, any other questions?
Question, just for clarification, and I think you've already stated it, but would you run it by me one more time? The issue with FERC, is it just their process, or whether they're trying to determine if they have jurisdictional authority over this all?
No, that's a great question. So what we had understood, and we've found plenty of documentation to support our assumption, was that FERC would take jurisdiction over the downhill portion of the project, everything from the high point on down where you're generating power. And so that would include the sections of pipe that feed each hydro plant. And in a sense, those are each penstocks feeding the following hydro plant. And then with this Ready for Environmental Analysis that came out in December of last year, they threw that into question a little bit, saying we're not sure what our jurisdiction will be, whether it will be over that portion of the project or just the hydro plants themselves, those specific locations. And then as we've kind of got a little bit of additional information, we understand that they're looking at 3 options right now. One would be to take jurisdiction over the limited hydro stations themselves. The second option would be what we always assumed, which would be the downhill portion of the project, the entire downstream power generating portion. And then the third option would be to take jurisdiction over the entire pipeline, which we hadn't considered previously. So we understand that they are analyzing, the FERC Commission is analyzing those 3 alternatives, and that their determination that comes out will be one of those 3. We just don't know which one it'll be. And no matter which one it is, we imagine that FERC would continue to lead the NEPA analysis and provide the environmental impact statement for the entire project. It would just change some of the jurisdictional questions. As to if they don't have jurisdiction over some of these areas, then which agency would step forward? And in the cases we're looking at, it would probably be Bureau of Land Management that would have a little bit more jurisdiction than they had previously. So I don't know, did that help?
Yes,
okay.
Yes, it does. I just was wondering, I wanted a little more clarification. I appreciate that, Joel. Well, any other questions from Mr. Williams? Thank you, Joel.
Thank you.
All right, our next agenda item is Bear River Development and an agreement with the Utah Transit Authority, and Director Millis will take that task.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. As you know, the Division of Water Resources has been in discussion with UTA related to multi-use utility corridor in Box Elder County. And while no formal agreement has yet been finalized, there's a potential for cost savings and less impacts to property owners via a potential corridor preservation partnership. UTA's leadership structure is currently changing, and so there's a lot of unknowns. However, division and UTA staff believe this will be a mutually beneficial effort in the future, and staff will provide updates to the board as more information becomes available.
Any questions for Director Millis on this right-of-way issue? Seeing none, thank you, Director Millis, for that report. Our next agenda item is the Water Conservation Report, and Faye Rudishauser is to give the report, but it looks like it might not be Faye.
Nope, this is Todd Adams.
Thank you, Todd.
Yeah. Thanks, Randy. Just remember, I have to look at you, too. Yes, it is. Okay. So we just want to give a quick update. The legislative session not this year, but the year prior, provided $750,000 of new general fund appropriation for water-saving devices. With those monies, we have built a Utah Water Savers web portal for citizens and users to go in and get their rebates. So we're working with local districts, trying to match the money where we can. This first year it's been kind of crazy getting a website up and getting the agreements going, determining how much money goes where. Anyway, we're about to go live with that, and on May 17th at 3:30 in the afternoon, we're gonna go live with a press event and let people know that these rebates are out there. They're already starting to come in, even the site's up and running and starting to be used. It's going to take a lot of pressure and work off of the local districts, as well as having staff here not have to look at each individual rebate. We've got some tests and some things so you know, hopefully it'll work smooth. We've been trying to break it a little bit in practicing, and it seems to be good. Just wanted to let you know of that. It's a pretty positive thing and will help. You can go in and buy a smart watering timer. Will match up to 50% up to $150. So anyway, that's the quick and dirty report. That's what Faye would have said.
Any questions for Todd? And I also neglected, Todd is also filling in, besides Faye Rudishauser is Aaron Austin. He's also filling in for us, so.
No, Aaron's here. I'll turn the mic over to Aaron.
Aaron, were you supposed to be up here? Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, I'm sorry. So there's part 2 to this report, right?
I think I was just waiting my turn.
Okay. I'm trying to follow the field notes up here.
Good afternoon. It'll be my opportunity to give you an overview and an update on our water-related land use program. I'm the lead GIS analyst in the tech services section, and so I've managed this program for a number of years, and we'll be excited to let you know about it. So this program is run under the state water planning portion of the division, and it's been run for a number of years, beginning in the 60s. So there's data sets that have been produced in the different basins around the state over that time, and this is a map that would let you know which years those surveys and those inventories have been done in those different basins. Over that period of time, there's been a number of different methods that have been employed, and over the years it's continually improving and changing in the processes that are used. Beginning in the early 2000s, we began to take tablet PCs out into the field. So each summer we would select a different basin in the state, sometimes multiple basins, and we would make an attempt to go to all the agriculture in that basin and collect the field type or what crops are being grown. And this is done with the purpose of estimating water use. So by understanding which crops are being used, we have an ability to estimate the amount of water that is used based on water use of those types of crops. And this is an input to our water budget calculations. So over time, we have aerial imagery that we can utilize to create field boundaries for the different agriculture. And as you would see over time, things are definitely changing in many areas of the state. So this area was just selected because it had some pretty dramatic change. So every few years we get this imagery. It's a national program that takes imagery during the agricultural growing season. We use that to create what we call our line work or our polygons. So over time we're developing these boundaries and attributing them with what's being grown there, and then making adjustments to those boundaries in successive years as houses are built or fields change and uses change. But as these ones show here, there's often, even though differences in the methodologies we're using or in the accuracy we've obtained, you're generally representing the same general field. Once we have that data collected and processed, then we share that publicly. So one of the places that's shared publicly is through this GIS database that's up at the state capitol. That also links to the historical files that we have in a Google Drive. It's kind of a modern FTP site. And then we also serve this data out in a form that it can be utilized in interactive online maps. So we're currently working on an update to this program because the old methodology would give us a picture of the state over a period of 6 years because of the manpower and the time required to visit those fields and to create that line work. And so there's just so much you can do in that method that you do a few basins each year and that's what you've got. On a rotational basis, you get around to other parts of the state. And we really see that as a limitation to the method because you don't have a yearly picture of what the crops are doing and the change that's occurring. So we're looking for ways to get to a yearly picture of the agriculture. So with those changes in methodology, we've gotten to a point where the line work, the boundaries of those fields is very good, and it doesn't need a whole-scale update every time that we return to it. Part of the problem we faced in the past was all that boundary work we'd created, the next time you revisit it is 6 years later. So you've got a lot of changes to deal with, updates in the technology and changes in that way, and it was always a new method each time. You'd have to kind of wholesale do that line work again. Now that we're further along in the process and we've gotten to a point we can only be looking for what's actually changed. So in this new method to do it yearly, we can look at the imagery and just be looking for something that is actually changed on the ground. So this is just an example of that. This old line work represents the number of flooded fields that were in this area. As we're scanning through, we see that a pivot has been placed in this area. And you would go in and update the line work so that it represents what's now on the ground. Anywhere where there hasn't been a change, the line work that we've already created can just stand for itself and we can continue on. This imagery that I've talked of is not produced yearly. That's one limitation of the process, but there's other image products, other ways to deal with that. Under the current administration, there's actually additional problems that have come up. This NAPE imagery is, from what I understand, not currently funded. So it may be flown this year in 2018 under the previous funding that had been given to the program. And then there may have to be a coalition built within the state or with different agencies to fund this type of imagery. There's other imagery that we have. There's Google imagery that we make use of, but that is not developed in the same way as the agricultural imagery. It's not done during the growing season. It's not done all in the same year. It's not. There's limitations to it, but I'm hopeful that this new method that we're moving into right now anyway can actually do quite well, even though we may have that limitation. And part of the reason for that is that we'll no longer be visiting every field and trying to make that determination of crop type. We're going to take advantage of other data that's available nationally. So the Cropland data layer is produced by the USDA, and we had an extensive meeting with Patrick Willis to kind of discuss how that's produced and if it could meet our needs. It's been produced in Utah on a consistent basis now since 2010. There's much older data sets back east because those large agricultural fields were much easier to do the remote sensing and gain a picture of from that higher level. But again, since 2010, we have good data for this. So this would represent what we collected in 2014 around Utah Lake, and similar data that comes from the Cropland data layer is available. This is that same concept zoomed in a bit more. And again, that Cropland data layer is producing different crop types in a raster form for those areas. So this new methodology, rather than visit every field, we make a selection of fields to visit. Could be fields that have unusual crop types, or that we have disagreements about what the CDL is producing for those fields that we want to have some of our own on-the-ground check. The CDL data is produced since it's a sister agency of the Farm Service Agency. They have access to the actual reports from the farmers. That data is not made publicly available. It's not something that we have access to, but it is something they can use to input into their model and train their system. And we've also, when we do these select checks, we've been sharing that data with them, and it's been improving their process. So we do those checks during the summer. We update the line work. We then take the field boundaries that we have obtained, and we do some geoprocessing with that raster data, and that allows us to assign a crop type to each field. We don't then just take that at face value. We're using that data we've collected in the field, and then we also, as we've done in the past, we compare the current data to what we've had in the past to red flag any problems or things we need to look into. And at the end of that process, we're able to output a crop type, and in this new process, that will be a statewide yearly data layer of the crops that we can then use in our water budget program to have a yearly assessment of that. In 2016, we did the Superior River Basin kind of as a test area. This summer of 2017, we did that select area study, and we're currently updating the line work for that full 2017 statewide layer. So the first statewide agricultural layer will be a 2017 layer, and we're kind of off and running. So from 2017 on, we should be able to produce statewide agricultural data. And that's all I have. Any questions?
Questions for Mr. Austin from the board? I guess it just kind of piques my interest. I've subscribed to a commercial service this year to have satellite flyovers that are going over twice a week or something to identify poor or good crop conditions on individual fields on my farm. And I don't know if the reason you're not getting stuff is more emphasis is being pushed over to the commercial side rather than the government agency side, or?
Yeah, so this CDL product is derived from the Landsat satellites. Mm-hmm. I know some of the commercial products that you'd pay for, sometimes they're paying for access to other satellites beyond that. The Landsat is, again, a federal program, and it's something that's freely available. And we definitely considered at times developing our own analysis of that Landsat imagery, satellite imagery, but it was determined basically that would be a duplication of effort if we can make use of what's being produced federally through this cropland data layer. So we had a lot of discussions. We have the stakeholders, that people are making use of our agricultural data, and just making sure that any changes we make to our system and the product we produce still meets their needs. But yeah, there's a lot of satellites and a lot of movement in that direction towards actually understanding real-time what's happening in those agricultural fields. There's other kind of related things that are going on in our division that are related to evapotranspiration, and whether it be kind of what they forecast it to be or actual ET, and that's happening in our section as well.
Okay, well, it's good to know. It's just kind of fascinating with what I've subscribed to for this year, and it's interesting the different pricings that are out there depending on which company you go with.
Yep. Mr.
Right,
Chairman, I've got a question or two
Yes.
for. Where is this data available at? Is it online on the website, or where can you find it?
The data that we provide, or the cropland data layer, or
Well,
both?
for instance, the 2016 Severe River piqued my curiosity. Where could I find that?
Yeah, so the let me get back here for you. So at gis.utah.gov, that's where these data layers are being served up, and it's /data/planning/water related land, and that website toward the bottom, there's actually a link to these downloadable files. So there are reports that we've done on each of the basins, so that would give you a summary of what we found. And then these are also the raw data files. So if you wanted to have access to those files and those tables, they're all publicly available in these ways.
And then my other question was, has there been any talk of working with your sister agency on adjudications or water rights, boundaries of decreed acreage, different things like that?
The work we do for this project isn't too tightly related to that. We've definitely suggested or had conversations with them about what we've already created being maybe useful to that process. I do know that some of our funds have been shared with that agency in order to staff their adjudication process. So there's some communication there. There hasn't been a great amount of overlap of what we're doing.
Blaine, they start with our data and then go down to finer detail. So that's what we've been told so far. We're trying to work with them and help them and share the resources we have. But they start with our data and then go down further.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Our next agenda item is the director's report, and we'll turn to Director Eric Millis for that.
Okay. Mr. Chairman and members of the board, I want to also thank staff for the great work that they do in so many things, not only the projects that you see, but the water conservation efforts. There's been a lot of new things that we've expanded into and refreshing old programs and just trying to make that as useful and helpful. And in this data program that Aaron just spoke to you about, been doing land use for years, and these guys are out here now working in really on the cutting edge with new data, new technology, trying to find ways to make it as good as possible for us. And over the last few years since the audit came out on the municipal and industrial water use data, we've gone to a program of collecting and processing that data each year now. And so being able to do this annually, also the agricultural use and other water-related land use data will be very, very helpful to us. So I just had a couple things I wanted to note. First of all, there's been a lot of press about the Central Arizona Water Conservancy District and the things that have come out of there, and just wanted to report that the Central Arizona Water Conservancy District was here actually in this building a week and a half ago to talk with the Upper Colorado River Basin states and the Upper Colorado River Commission staff about the things that have been in the news, and also to make a commitment to work closely with the state of Arizona to bring things back together for that state so that the drought contingency planning and other things that are going on now don't get stalled and don't get done just for the benefit of one entity, but that things are done for the good of the whole on the Colorado River. So that would be the 7 basin states plus Mexico. And so those commitments have been talked about and are being made, and it's just the emphasis right now is on continuing those discussions and doing so with all the parties involved. Another important thing I wanted to mention to you is that the Salinity Control Forum will be here in Utah next week. They will be in the St. George area having their meetings there, but one important project that they'll be looking at in that area is a way to collect or reduce the amount of salt that is coming out of the Patempe hot springs there near Lavercan, and keep that out of the Colorado River system. And that's a big important project. It's one that's been talked about for a lot of years. I think the science and studies that were needed to assess what could be done with that are wrapping up now. So we'll look forward to hearing reports on that next week. The Salinity Control Program does a lot of good in being able to reduce the salinity in the Colorado River, which is very important to the downstream users, but also, just as importantly, it provides money for projects here in the state of Utah and the other upper basin states for agricultural efficiency and other types of things. And this project be sort of akin to the Paradox Well project that's in Colorado. The water's not nearly as salty, but there's more of it, and so it's, it'll have its own challenges, but it'll be an important and interesting project for the state and the salinity control program to work on together. So those are the things that I had, Mr. Chairman. Ben Merritt has a project slideshow ready to go if you'd like to entertain that.
Excellent. We'll ask Ben to show us where some of our efforts are successfully hitting the ground.
Mr. Chairman, Eric, so are they looking at doing an injection facility on it as well?
So there's several things that are being looked at, and if I go back to the Paradox project, that project's been in place for 20 years now and controlled a tremendous amount of salt, but they have had earthquake problems there over the years, and they're looking at that project hitting its useful life soon. And so they've been looking there at an additional injection well or ponds, evaporation ponds, or they've had a contractor there testing a process that would allow them to basically dehydrate and separate the salt out, and it comes out in, you know, a fairly firm glob. And so that's one of the things, that particular process is probably one of the more likely things that will be looked at Potempe because of the limited space, not only right there at that point on the Virgin River or the river, but as you go downstream, you've got the town, you've got a park, it's very limited space. And so I think that's something that would be looked at probably ahead of injection or evaporation.
Well, I think if they can avoid injection, I think it'd be a better. With the amount of earthquakes that were being generated from that particular.
Right.
Okay. Just curious. Thank you.
Thanks for your question, Randy. Any other questions to Eric Nellis for his report? Okay, Ben, we'll move forward with your presentation.
Okay. I was asked to put together a slideshow that would kind of show and outline one or some of the projects that I've been working on. And rather than focus on one or two projects that, and kind of dive into the minute technical details, of the project and really go into it, I kind of thought that I would pick a few projects over my short 2.5-year tenure here with the division and hope to illustrate for you the good that we're doing here and the good that the money that the state is putting into these projects is doing, both for basically for the state of Utah and for our economy. So the first project that I'd like to briefly talk about is the Bear River Canal Company. This was actually the first project that I was put on, and you can see here a map that details some of the work that was done. The project started out with one engineer, and they wanted to do some concrete lining, which is very expensive work. About halfway through the project, they decided that they wanted to switch to a cheaper alternative, which was a EPDM liner, which will allow them to line or greater extend the canal and save a lot more water. So the yellow sections you see there are sections that were lined with EPDM canal liner. And really coolly, the Bear River Canal Company has just received a Water Smart grant that's going to allow them to extend that further, and they will be coming before the board shortly to request additional funds to help them extend the EPDM liner to the section shown in orange there. So here is a before photo of the canal. This section was piped. There's a town there in the trees. There's, well, a small town. There's some houses there, and they piped this section for safety concerns, but also, to prevent or reduce seepage loss. And here's an after photo. So that canal is totally enclosed there. Here is a short section of the concrete liner that they installed. And then also here is a before photo and an after photo of the same location with the EPDM liner installed. Now, the EPDM liner is a kind of a shorter-term fix to a serious seepage problem that they have. They hope to, in the future, implement more permanent changes to the canal. And here's another photo of that. This canal is nearly 20 miles long, and so it'll be a big project once they get around it. They'll probably end up doing it in phases, but so they were able to install 6,350 feet of EPDM liner and 860 feet of concrete pipe and 600 feet of concrete liner. They used $900,000 of board funds, and their estimated water conservation is a very, very conservative 3,200 acre feet per year. The next project I'd like to briefly talk about is the Down Irrigation Company. On the top there you can see two sections that are open canal that were piped. This canal was a historic canal and was built and used by the settlers of the Heber Valley. And it was historical, and there were some issues with that, but it was resolved. You can see the measurement flume there and the stream diversion also on the bottom. They were in construction midwinter. Here's just a few photos of the pipe and the outlet into their equalization pond from the pipe. Also they had a few road crossings, just construction photos. And here's their new stream diversion and also the outlet structure that was shown just previously. So with this project, they installed 1.3 miles of irrigation pipe, and they were able to use the funds from the board to leverage a $224,000 Water Smart grant. They're required as part of the Water Smart grant to come up with 50% of the funds. So their estimated water conservation is 2,000 acre feet per year, which is really exciting. The West Porterville Irrigation Company was recently authorized by the board and has not yet gone into construction, but this is a brief overview of the project. They're going to replace asbestos concrete pipeline, which is currently there, and then also increase the size of their equalization pond. Here's a photo of their existing diversion structure on the stream. And this is their equalization pond, which is too small. And the reason it's too small is because the inlet to their pipe gets plugged up because the debris hasn't been given enough time to settle out of the water. So it's going to be really good for them to get rid of that asbestos concrete pipe because it's toxic, and every time they have to deal with it, it's hazardous. So they're going to replace 25,000 feet of that pipe. They're going to increase their equalization pond size, and using money from the board are going to leverage a $1 million Water Smart grant. And although the water conservation project on this project is a lot smaller than the other ones, there are other benefits which are really important to them. The Echo Ditch Company. This is a shot of their system right below Echo Reservoir. The Canal Company's been there well before the I-80 and I-84 interchange was ever put in, and since it's been put in, and there's a railroad also that goes through there, the whole thing is just a big spaghetti mess. They've got pipes going under the railroad, pipes going under the freeway, and it's just a really difficult system. But part of their system was donated to them, and this is a piece of it right here. They're under construction right now. This is an old natural gas pipeline that had severe corrosion, and because of the cathodic protection from the new line that was put in, it was actually damaging this line, and they actually were flooding out the freeway, which is a major problem for obvious reasons. This is a photo of the old systems. They literally had people just pumping water out of the ditch, with gas-powered pumps, and they were, losing water also through just percolation into the ground. Here's a photo of the new pipe going in right next to one of the old gates for one of their fields that they were flood irrigating. So there's what they're doing with all the sections where the old natural gas pipeline is, as they're slip lining the new pipe into that line. So they're not actually digging it up. They're not actually digging up the freeway. They're just slipping that new pipeline in there, which is really cool. And just a couple of photos of interest. There was a grave located next to the project site from I think it was 1887. 1881. 1881. I don't know that headstone is that old, but the grave has been. They actually had a cadaver dog up there and found a few other graves next to the site. The photo on the left is up on the top. There's two markers, but the marker on the top with the chisel marks in it is the original marker from the railroad survey back in the 1860s. And it's still there and still used. So for this project, they will install 11,500 feet of irrigation pipe and slip line 5,800 feet of their existing natural gas pipeline that they've been using to deliver water through. They have used or are using board funds to leverage a $290,000 Water Smart grant and have an estimated water conservation of 330 acre feet. Lower Marion Pipeline Company, which started with Joel, and I was brought on later on. Here's just a shot of their system that they've installed. And this is their old diversion structure, which I'd like to mention these photos are beautiful because they were taken up in cameras. I think a rock could take a camera up there and just take the most beautiful pictures ever. But anyway, this is the Canal Company used to, or they have an upper and a lower section that they split the water into. And so here's the pipeline has been buried, so I don't really have any photos of that. But here's the diversion structure that they installed. On the top, I kind of pieced that together so you can see the whole thing. On the bottom left, where the water is spilling over the screen, that goes into that's where the water enters the pipe. And then on the bottom right, you can see there's a diversion for the pipe, and then there's a diversion for the canal. There's two canal companies that use this. The other one goes to the other canal company, and they have an open ditch system. And the Weaver River, this was last year, was just raging. The river was just raging. So they installed 6¼ miles of irrigation pipe, and the board committed $1.46 million to the project. They only used $963,000 and were able to use that to leverage a $1 million Water Smart grant. And they conserved an estimated 2,900 acre feet of water, which is awesome. So just to recap, and this is my favorite slide, because it shows everything. The board funds over these 5 projects have been $3.6 million. And they were able to leverage $2.5 million of federal funds, most of that into Utah's economy. And those 5 projects, we estimated water conservation of 9,000 plus acre feet of water, which is incredible. And that's the story. The funds and the things that we do here are we conserve water in these projects, in most of these projects, and it's good for us, and it's good for our progeny. So that is my slideshow. Any questions?
Thank you, Ben. Any questions for Ben?
Yeah, I have a question. Ben, back on the Bear River Canal project, the canal lining material, what's the life expectancy of it? You said it was kind of short term, but
yeah. I don't recall the exact number. It wasn't terribly long. The reason they did this, they opted to go for the EPDM liner was because they had such terrible seepage problems, and it was cheap, and they needed to just get as much of that canal covered as they possibly could with the money that they had. So it was a shorter term fix, but it took care of the problem at hand. Before they installed that, they were not able, no matter how much water they dumped into that canal, they were not able to get any water to the end. So they had shareholders who couldn't even use their water right. But since putting in the liners and the pipe, they have last year, which was the first year they ran it, they were able to get water to the end of the canal.
It was not popular being on the board of directors that year, so we were really motivated to do as much as we could, as fast as we could.
We've got HDPE liners at our place. We're going on 35 years.
Are you using HDPE or Husker or? That's good to know.
And we have liner that we've buried in some of the local canals. Dirt covered on them. We're going 50, 60 years so far on some of them. HDPE is similar to this material.
Any other comments or questions for Ben in his presentation? Not. Thank you, Ben. We enjoyed that very much. It's
You
good
bet.
to know the good we're doing in the world, or the division is.
All right, thank you.
Very much. All right. That concludes everything on the agenda. I'd like to thank the staff for everything they do to provide service to the people of the state of Utah. I'm grateful and appreciate those of you who are visitors who have come here today, and would invite you to come back again to next board meeting. And I want to thank the Board of Water Resources for their attendance today, and I appreciate all the efforts you make to make this a worthwhile operation. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Randy Crozier makes a motion to adjourn. All in favor of the motion, say aye. We are adjourned.